Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/ProRevenge, where people get back at others for wronging them, and the stories are absolutely wild. And in today's episode, we've got idiots towing people's cars away, blackmailing others, messing with lawyers, trying to ruin careers, and they all get taught lessons they won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I was recently reminded of a funny story that took place a while back. It's also not my story, I was barely involved. So a long time ago, at my other job at this animal shelter, myself and a couple of coworkers were talking. A long time ago, at my other job at an animal shelter, myself and a couple of coworkers were talking. And one coworker mentioned that her son's car kept getting messed up in the student parking lot at the school he went to. So I asked why, and she said apparently another student has it in his head that one particular parking spot in the student parking lot is his, despite there never having been assigned parking at the school. Now, this kid, who I'll call Travis, has a tow truck. Not even one of those big flatbed trucks. It's a crappy little beater truck with a tow hook in the back. If you've ever seen the movie Cars, think slightly bigger than Mater. Anyways, whenever somebody parks in Travis's spot, he will then tow that person's car out, and he'll park in the aforementioned spot, usually damaging the vehicle in the process. Well, while my coworker was telling us this, I said, you know what would be funny? Parking the Bearcat in that spot and weighing it down. It would be effing hilarious to see that little idiot try to tow that big chungus of a vehicle. A Bearcat is the armored SWAT vehicles that police use, that you often see in movies and TV shows. The chief of police was chatting with us at the time, as the animal shelter in my hometown is considered part of the police department, and the guy laughed and said, I would love to see that. So here's the revenge. To start, the state I live in, according to the laws, moving a vehicle a certain distance without the owner's consent and without proper towing permits is considered vehicle theft. I was told this story a few days later, so here's how it went down. The police chief placed a bait truck in the parking spot, and then set up a couple of undercover units close by. The truck itself was weighed down with a crap load of cement bags. My coworker said that she was surprised the truck didn't collapse under the weight. Sure as heck, Travis shows up. He sees the truck in his spot and he attempts to tow it away. Now, the plan was for the undercovers to come out and arrest him right then and there. But what happened next is he did a burnout trying to move the truck. He was successful for a few feet, at least the bare minimum for a misdemeanor. And then the back axle pops out of the tow truck. That's when the undercovers came out and they arrested him. The camera footage was then obtained, which showed the roughly 100 other times he's done this, which of course only bumps up his charges. Guys, the post ends right there, but what an incredible sense of entitlement, right? Like, did that idiot on purpose drive a tow truck to school, knowing he would always be able to get a parking spot by towing somebody else away? And honestly, I don't know about you guys, but after a few times of this happening to me, I'd be throwing hands. Like, who the heck does he think he is, just towing people out of their parking spots so he can take the spot? With that said though, like, if this has happened so many times and they have footage of this happening, then why the heck did it keep happening? So my very good friend has made some slightly dumb mistakes, and she sent some pictures to somebody that she thought she could trust. But not knowing more than his first name, screen name, and roughly where he lived and the type of work he did, that proved to be a big mistake. Now, the guy's not in our country, but he had indicated that he'd be traveling for work near us shortly, and they had made some plans to meet up. When she got some red flags and backed out, the dude threatened to publish these pictures online. Now, a thing about me is I am, incidentally, an attorney. So some searching later and gathering up any pictures he sent her of him that could possibly identify him, his online handle led me to a TikTok page, which then led me to an Instagram page with his name on it. That then led me to a LinkedIn page with his place of work that matched the picture he sent with a branded polo he was wearing. Some more searches got me the email of the CEO, the VP of HR, Operations Manager, and Public Relations Manager. And with that, I fired off an email on behalf of my client of the screenshots of him threatening revenge porn. I also sent snippets of the conversation showing that username, while he sent that exact picture of him wearing his company's branded apparel, and links to how I know it's him, along with pictures he sent her of his motorcycle with the license plate showing, as further proof it's him. I also included screenshots of him discussing a workplace incident that were timestamped, along with pieces of dialogue discussing how he got naked with an ex at his place of work, and discussing plans to do it with her in his office as well. I also included a picture he sent her, showing his work laptop with his entire Outlook calendar, along with information which he sent to prove he was busy, along with other pictures he took of his workplace with non-consenting employees. I further informed his employer that I would be forwarding all this information to the local law enforcement, and since he had indicated that he would soon be traveling to the US, I will also be forwarding this to the local office of the FBI, as since my client is a US citizen on US soil, these threats constituted a federal crime. I then said that should they continue with his employment and continue with their plans to send him to the US for work, I will ensure on behalf of my client that federal law enforcement is waiting for him on arrival, which I will do, as one of the assistant US attorneys for this region is a law school buddy of mine. Since I have his license plate number, I know where he lives, and I'll be contacting his local authorities tomorrow. You dumb mother effer. Thinking you were hiding around, thinking you could threaten my friend? It took me 45 minutes to destroy your life. Holy, that revenge fallout is dipping into nuclear territory, guys. Because you know that idiot is done for, right? And this is why you don't do stuff like this. Like, don't send explicit pictures of yourself if you don't want it out there. Don't blackmail others, and never make the assumption that you're 100% anonymous and safe, because if somebody really wanted to find you, they could. And I think we can all agree that we could all use a friend like OP in our lives, right? Never know when they'll come in handy. I was pushing 40, and I'd learned a lot of lessons in more than 10 years of legal practice. But one of the most important lessons I learned was from an older lawyer that I worked for as a summer student after the second year of law school. He told me a lawyer has 3 duties. First, to himself. Second, to the court, and last, the client. Always make sure you come first and the client comes last. And the reason is because clients will F you. They'll throw you under the bus without thinking twice. Now, I should have stayed with this lawyer, but being young and an idiot, I had to go work downtown, and I'm still downtown. But fortunately for me, I remembered this lesson, and it came in handy many years later when a client really did try to throw me under the bus. My client was this mid-sized company that did this and that and owned things here and there. Not big enough to be listed, but they did have a pretty sizable real estate portfolio. And one day, a building they owned burned to the ground. The company wanted to collect on the insurance, so they told Frank, a veteran salaryman, to deal with it. Now, Frank was close to 60, and he thought he knew what he was doing. The guy didn't need me to help him with the insurance claim. He told me that he had everything under control. Besides, lawyers are expensive. Some guys really get off on not paying legal fees, and Frank was one of those guys who gloated over every penny he managed to not pay the lawyers. I dealt with Frank a lot, and he was always nickel and diming me. So I tell Frank the insurer is going to F you. And it was only by luck that I even knew about the fire and loss because Frank had not asked for my help. He just let it slip one day. And since then, I had kept on top of him, trying to get him to smarten up. I had to fight him to get him to send me the proof of loss form to make sure he hadn't messed that up. And Frank did F up a lot, and I wondered sometimes how he even had a job. But the proof of loss was okay, at least, so that was one less thing to worry about. You don't know that, he said. I could tell he wanted to get me off the phone. I tell him I'm paid to know when insurers are trying to screw my clients, and the insurer is going to screw you. I tell Frank they've been stringing you along for ages with requests and questions about paperwork, but they aren't going to pay you, not unless you sue them. But Frank said he knew what he was doing. It was all under control. And besides, he got along with the adjuster so great. I tell him the limitation period expires in 2 weeks, and once that 2 weeks passes, it'll be too late to sue. The moment that limitation period expires, they will stop taking your calls. You'll get a final email saying, sorry, you're out of time, and that will be that. Don't leave this until the last minute. Let me sue right now, and you'll have the money in no time. At that, Frank was like, sure, fine, whatever, don't bother me, I got this, blah blah blah. And he got off the phone as soon as he could. I sent him the usual email with clear warnings and recommendations, which he ignored. I then sent the email again, and then again as the limitation period approached, and then again a couple of days before the deadline. My final email said, I'm going to be at trial, and you won't be able to reach me, but you have to sue. You have other firms on your list, so pick one and sue. Frank didn't bother to reply, and I went off to do my trial. The trial lasted a couple of weeks, and no email from Frank. And then a month passed, and then another month. Still no email. I figured he must have sorted things out, right? Like maybe Frank was right after all, I said to myself. And that's when my phone rang, and it was Frank. Frank said to me, so remember that fire insurance thing we spoke about? We'd only spoken about it like a dozen times. I figured the guy was calling up to gloat, so I cut to the chase and say, so they paid out, right? That's great, Frank. You were right. He then asked me what I was talking about and could he see a copy of the claim. I say to him, what claim? He said to me, the claim against the insurer, you know, that claim. I say to him, does that mean the insurer didn't pay? He then hung up on me, and a few minutes later, my computer dinged. And there was Frank's email, talking about how we spoke, how he told me to sue, and he was worried that I didn't send him a copy of the claim, so he was following up to get a copy of the claim. I emailed him back. I say, so I take it the insurer didn't pay you, just like I told you they wouldn't. And now that the limitation period is expired, they told you to jump in the lake, leaving you with a loss in the millions. Is that it? I had made a mistake by not going over Frank's head when he wouldn't listen to me. But if I had gone over Frank's head, I never would have received another file from him, so I didn't. But that was then, and this was now. So I CC'd Frank's boss, and his boss's boss, plus I CC'd Bill, the client's in-house counsel. Bill acknowledged my email right away, and he called me later that day. He said to me, Frank messed up. We know that. He's an idiot, so what do we do? I respond, so his excuses didn't work? Nope. Bill then explained that they had summoned Frank to a boardroom, but his story didn't add up, given all the warnings I'd sent him. Besides, there would have been no reason for him to keep emailing the insurer if he told me to sue. Once the file goes to legal counsel, Frank's role was over. The company knew Frank was BSing them, and Bill said, so that's it then? We just lost a couple of $1,000,000? I tell Bill it's okay, explaining that when I realized that Frank was going to F up, I issued a claim against the insurer because I'd made Frank send me proof of loss a while earlier, and I had enough information that I could sue to preserve the cause of action. Not a great claim and short on details, but good enough. Bill said to me, you sued without instructions? Now, the thing is, lawyers are not supposed to sue without instructions, because if you do that, you're personally liable for whatever cost the other side incurs. It's a big deal to sue without instructions. So I say, yep, I sued without instructions. I then pull up a copy of the claim and emailed it to him as we spoke. I say to him, it's a little rough, but we can always amend. Bill said, thank God, can I leave it with you? And of course he could. The insurer was a sitting duck, and I knew I'd collect from them, no problem. A few days later, I get a call from another guy who worked for the client, a guy I didn't normally deal with. They had a situation and needed my help. I pick up the phone and say, I usually deal with Frank, what's up? What was up was that Frank got called into another meeting and they handed him a one-page letter. And then he put his little office things in a box and security walked him past his coworkers to the elevator and then escorted him downstairs to the parking lot. Bye-bye, Frank. And the thing is, he was too old to get another job, or at least a decent one. It was a life-changing event for Frank, but for me, it was just another anecdote. A cautionary tale that I tell young lawyers sometimes over beers. Maybe a little too often because I'm getting on in years and I have my favorite stories. Now, I wasn't trying to get revenge on Frank, not at all. And I would have felt a bit sorry for him if he hadn't been trying to throw me under the bus. But the guy who replaced him was great and he never nickel and dimed me, so it was all good. And this is why you don't play games like that with lawyers, guys. And honestly, if anyone is pro at covering their ass, it's gonna be a litigation lawyer. And the way OP handled that was freaking brilliant, guys. Like, with that said though, why the heck would Frank not listen to OP, right? Like, it's not like Frank was the one paying out of pocket for the lawyers. It just boggles my mind how he was assigned one simple task by his boss, and he chose to nickel and dime OP. Like, for what? What was the guy trying to prove? What a weird hill to die on, right? And now the guy's jobless and basically ended his veteran career. I'm a 30-year-old female, and I've been a people pleaser to a fault my whole life. I've been working in marketing for 10 plus years. Over the years, I've had my fair share of bosses who were good, average, and some who sucked. There was one in particular that stood out as awful. This story is from about 5 plus years ago. Her name was Pamela. She was in her 40s. Not a real name. She was the VP of marketing and sales for a mid-sized retailer. She started at the company a few years after I did, and if rumors were true, she was the 4th pick for the position, and she was simply hired so the company could appease shareholders. I was a manager under her, and my whole job was to make sure the website and stores had their products merchandised properly, received all their monthly sales materials, managed advertising, set up and managed the department's budget, PM'd all department projects and operations, created reporting to reflect sales, managed presentations and briefs for future projects, etc. In short, I did her work and all the administrative grunt work to keep the department afloat. I managed all of this because I had access to her email, and many times sent emails on her behalf to keep the department functioning. Pamela was lazy. She spent most of her time showing up after 10 a.m., taking business lunches, and planning company parties. You know, all the easy stuff. I constantly questioned why she spent so much of our budget on these events when we didn't have the budget resources for any of it. Pamela told me to take from future months' budgets to pay for the current month's overspending. So at the start of every month, I had an original budget, and by the end of the month, I had to turn in an edited budget, edited under Pamela's direction, that made it look like Pamela's spending was under control. This is important for later. I definitely made mistakes here and there, being in charge of so many tasks, and constantly found myself working 12-hour days, split between being in the office and working after my kid went to bed. Weekend work was also done before my family woke up, and after they went to bed. So during Pamela's first major holiday season, sales were garbage. Pamela kept changing her mind on the visuals for the stores, and she kept bringing on new advertising and PR agencies to bring in sales. All of these agencies consisted of her personal friends. And also, she would ignore our team's planned promotion for her own better ones. At this time, I had been dealing with an ongoing infection that turned to sepsis, and I was hospitalized. The doctors and my husband said it was due to the stress of work and that I need a break. As I recovered, I realized how much I was hurting myself, my family, and even the company I worked for. Eventually, my old habits got to me, and I got to my phone, and I checked mine and my boss's emails, and what I found made my blood boil. First, I got a lovely bouquet of flowers from upper management, wishing me well, and I knew that Pamela organized the delivery because she sent me her favorite flowers. I then went to her inbox to put the receipt in the correct folder, to send to accounting when I got back. At the top of her inbox from the past 3 days were emails clearly not relating to business. What I found in her emails was Pamela emailing her personal friends, griping on how I can't just shake off sepsis and get back to work. She also complained that she couldn't find any of my notes, spreadsheets, or documents for any of the work that she was technically in charge of, that I was doing. And I also want to note that they were on our shared drive, labeled very clearly. Finally, I find this email where she sent to a friend from a previous company, asking for advice on how to bring in sales to save her job. In this long thread, this old colleague asked if there was anyone managing most of the work. And of course, Pamela said that I was. This colleague then explained that clearly it was my mismanagement that was causing issues, and that I could be blamed if sales didn't pull through by the end of the season. Pamela then mentioned that I was in the hospital and repeated the comments from her other email thread. The person said that she couldn't outright fire me because it would seem like retaliation because I needed to take emergency medical leave. But if Pamela could prove that I was stealing from the company or misusing company resources, then she would have the grounds to get me fired and use me as a scapegoat. So upon my return, Pamela calls me into her office and said she was worried I was taking on too much, and she wanted to take work off my plate. She announced that she was taking managing the department budget off my plate. She then asked me to drop off a small stack of invoices to accounting. Additionally, Pamela told me that under no circumstances was I allowed to talk to accounting about anything regarding budgets. She also told me if I had concerns about the department or workload, I wasn't allowed to go to HR. I had to discuss it directly with Pamela, and I could see where this was going. Unfortunately for Pamela, I had built a rapport with Lois, who's in her 50s, who is our main accountant. Lois always said that she would do everything in her power to help me, should I ask, as we were more friends than coworkers. Knowing this, I grabbed the stack of invoices off of Pamela's desk to give to accounting. I also added the email threads I read while I was in the hospital, and the current unedited budget that Pamela hadn't touched yet for the month. I also found in my filing cabinet the hard copies of old budgets with Pamela's handwriting on what numbers to change to balance our budget. Finally, I added an email from our first round of budget adjustments where Pamela threatened to put someone else in my job if I didn't do what she asked. So I walked and dropped off the invoices to accounting when I bumped into Lois. She brought up the invoices and I sternly looked at her and said, Pamela is the only one in our department that Lois is allowed to talk to about the budget and invoices. Lois saw the suspiciously thick file folder on her desk, gave a firm nod, and lovingly kicked me out of her office. Within the week, Pamela was fired. From what I understand, she's been continually job hopping the past few years. The CEO and HR brought me in to personally apologize for everything I went through, and they gave me a paid 1-week vacation to take at my discretion. And given other issues with this business, I left after another year. Which brings me to today. I'm once again manager for sales and marketing. I have a wonderful boss named Mike in his 40s, who trusts my business decisions and backs me up on practically everything. We are in the process of hiring a team for me to solely manage and direct. And today, I looked through the applicants and I found Pamela's resume sitting among dozens of others. I just stare at her name, wondering how many other people share her name. And upon review, it's her. And she definitely fell down the corporate ladder, with VP of our old company being the highest title she earned. And to no surprise, she's embellishing her achievements, claiming the work I managed as her own, and claimed she generated an 87% sales growth during the holiday season at our previous company. And I gotta let you know, as a people pleaser who firmly believes in giving everyone a chance, it's never been so satisfying to click disqualified. Guys, this revenge is frickin' amazing. And again, this is why it's important to cover your ass at work, especially when you know you're being asked to do something super duper shady. And I only wish OP got petty with Pamela and gave her a call and said, hey Pamela, remember me, I used to work at this company with you. So I have this resume here for this opening on my team, and this person has the same name as you. I just want to make sure it's actually 2 different people. So yeah, the resume in front of me says the person increased holiday sales 87%. I know that couldn't have been you because you did absolutely nothing. I would have remembered a stunning number like that. And oh, the person also said they improved the budget process, but since I remember you screwing the numbers over to cover up your incompetence, that couldn't have been you either. Oh, wouldn't that have been a fun phone call? And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /ProRevenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/malicious compliance episode, where a boss tries to screw over OP, and she gets taught a lesson she'll never forget. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.